Now then, a few days have passed since I finished off that story about the MG in the garage at 45 Woodside, and I remember telling you that we bought another MG shortly afterwards. In fact, we bought two. Well, this blue one needed some work on it. This is the blue MG from Hall's at Morton. And so during my travels over the next few weeks, I was asking around to all the local people in each area if anybody knew of an old MG for sale which I could use to spare parts. It obviously had to be a TA. And after not very long, I came across another one. This time it was at Market Deeping, which is only just a few miles south of Bourne, on the other side, opposite Morton. Morton was north of Bourne. Market Deeping is south of Bourne, on the way to Peterborough. And there, behind the chemist shop, in the centre of the town, was a TAMG in the yard behind. It was for sale. This one had no engine and no floor. It hadn't got the brakes with the pedal, the four-wheel brakes. They weren't working. I say it had no engine, but all the body was there. And I think, if I remember rightly, the blue one had a bit of a noisy back axle, so we were looking for another back axle that we could probably swap it for. So I think I paid £25 for this one. No engine, no floor, brakes didn't work, handbrake worked, fortunately. So I managed to persuade Peter, my neighbour and companion in all things ridiculous. Digress again. All right, there's a story called Three Mad Men in a Small Sailing Boat. Now that's Peter again. All right, so that's the kind of thing we used to get up to. So back to the MG, I persuaded Peter to come down to Market Deeping with the length of string. We didn't have things like rigid bars and stuff in those days, and the roads were a lot quieter. And so we went down to Market Deeping and we towed this car back to 45 Woodside. This was a little bit more adventurous because it had no floor, so we had to find some wood to put in the floor of this car. So when Peter sat in it, then at least he got his feet weren't pedalling along on the road underneath. And the handbrake worked, so he'd got a handbrake. The steering worked, fortunately. And we were a lot more careful with this particular journey because of those facts that he'd only got brakes on the back. The car, hadn't been on the road for years and years and years. The tyres were pumped up. It had, 19-inch spoke knockoff wheels, just like the other one. I think it was a wee bit older. So we towed this home. Well, we couldn't. The driveway in front of 45 Woodside wasn't, double width or anything. I think we did manage to park one alongside the other, but it wasn't generally, the done thing. And there were some like little bylaws with regard to what you could do and what you couldn't do on this estate. There's bits about the garden and things, so the things were so that it was nice for everybody. People couldn't do unpleasant things. We did do one unpleasant thing, but that's Peter again. I'll tell you about that in the next story. So we got this car home and I took it to bits. Now, in our house, we were the first owners of this house and we had it built to our spec. It cost us £3,100. And we had warm air underfloor, warm air central heating. It came out of ducts under the floor. Ever so good for airing your clothes and stuff. And when you sat on the toilet in the bathroom, it blew at your feet and kept you nice and warm. It was gas fired It was quite a new thing, you know, and we were the only people on the estate with this particular setup. And we had an open fire in the sitting room. It was one of those where the draft came through, a Baxi I think it was. The draft came through air bricks through the front of the house, through another duct, so that when you had the coal fire burning, it didn't, you know, create a draft under your door. The actual draft came through from under the floor and up into the fire. So when you sat in front of it, there wasn't an awful draft blowing up the chimney. Quite canny that was. That was a nice thing too. So we had a coal house, and you had a coal house and a pantry and a kitchen and everything in these houses. But our coal house is empty. So I filled it with an MG TA. The chassis went in there. It must have had a pretty tall roof, because I took everything off the chassis, stored everything in boxes. Peter helped me, and we used some of the bits on this blue car to make it better. Do you know, I really can't remember who bought all these spare parts, but I know before we left Woodside we sold all the bits. I mean, I made more than 25 quid on selling all the bits that we took off the car. Took some doing. By golly, I can't even imagine myself doing that now. Anyway, we did. I mean, there's, you know, steering rack and the wheels and the brake shoes and the drums, and it all came off. And with a complete strip chassis went vertically in the coal house. So we stored a TAMG in our coal house, admittedly in bits. So that was the second TAMG that we bought, you know, to help us to improve the blue one when we got it on the road. Before we sold the blue one, we didn't do a lot more to it actually. Ruth ran it, and then of course Helen came, so we couldn't get the carry-cot pram thing in it, and so we had to decide we would sell it anyway. So that's when I used it to buy that boat trailer. Well, not long after all this, we really liked the MGs, and we hadn't got one. We got bits in the coal house, and I'd got the Firestone car, and I'd sold the Rover. After we'd got rid of all the drop tanks, I sold the Rover to a chap in Skegness and his wife. I'm very pleased with it. It's still a lovely car, the Rover 90. And I was taking Motorsport magazine at one stage, and in there was a TAMG for sale. Locally, it had been restored. This would be only a year after. So if it was 67, this would be 68. And it was a car that had been featured in one of the popular car magazines. It was either Popular Motorist or Car Mechanics. I take Car Mechanics. I've done, by golly, 30 years or more now. Very useful magazine to have. And this car was at Ketton, which is just the other side of Stamford. We're back in that area again, aren't we? And Ketton was in my area because at Ketton was the Ketton Cement, and they had a lot of lorries using a lot of tyres. So I knew Ketton quite well. And this was a chap called Brian Cox. I do remember his name. And he was a featured writer in this particular magazine. And this car had been in it. I didn't realise that, but this car had been in the magazine as he'd done it up, TAMG. And he'd actually done it up from top to bottom, or bottom to top. It was beautiful. Totally restored. Even the instruments were restored. It was really beautiful. And my grandfather had died a bit back. And so I did have a few pennies in the bank, and this was before Harold Wilson devalued the pound in 1969. Oh my gosh, that was a lot of things happened, didn't they? This is before Harold devalued the pound, because when he devalued the pound, we lost any money you got in the bank. You know, you lost about 15-20% of it. Would you believe it? It's true. I mean, 1969, I think it was. It was around about that time. Anyway, Howard was the Prime Minister, I think it was him. Devalued the pound, and everybody who had savings lost a big chunk of it. That's it, gone. So we used our money then to buy Peregrine, the boat. You'll see that in other stories. Anyway, back to the cars. And Ruth and I decided we'd buy this car, which Brian Cox had. And because we loved the cars. Because the only thing is, if we went on a long journey, you know, I mean, we didn't do terribly long journeys. We went up to North Somercotes to a school fete once, and different do's. And we normally use the car in the summertime, but if it was the weather was a bit inclement, you needed a rug, you know, around your knees. Even the driver needed a rug around your knees. I mean, they weren't draft proof or anything like that. There was a hell of a gale used to blow through the cab as you're driving along. Only plywood floor and gaps here and gaps there. And of course, then the car's open. You know, you've got side covers and things, which you fitted in the doors, slotted in the doors, and trying to keep weather out. But it was drafty and it was cold. But wow, they were lovely to drive. Right, we bought this car from Brian Cox, and you know, I've no pictures of it. It was a red TA. We didn't keep it all that long because we drove it about and had quite a lot of fun with it. But one day, I was checking the water in the radiator, and I unscrewed the radiator cap, which was very heavy, solid brass, you know, chrome plated brass, I think it was. And I dropped it on the front valance and chipped a lump of paint out. It had a 14 coat respray, that car. I chipped this paint out the front valance, and by golly, I thought, I can't really use a car like this, you know, every day. You just, you know, you'd scream at yourself what if you did any more damage to it. And £2,000 I paid for it. I suppose £2,000. The house only cost us £3,000, so it was quite an expensive car. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? You do crazy things when you're young, don't you? Right, so we didn't keep it, and I sold it to my sister, and she then sold it to my cousin Giles, who lives just north of Beverley, and he's still got it. It's worth a lot more than £2,000 now. But we had a lot of fun with it, and lovely. Still couldn't put the carry cot in it, so I had to find a car for Ruth eventually. You know, it was more practical. But that was MG TA number 3. But yeah, lovely to have, and the experience was unforgettable. Beautiful car, you know. It would outperform my Ford Anglia, you know, because I've got twin carbs. I've not, in the last film, I think I mentioned overhead cam. I don't think they're overhead valve certainly. But overhead valve in 1936 was quite something when you think of the Ford 100E vans, which were being sold right up to the end of the 1960s, were side valve. You see a story about this van at the Lincolnshire Standard, and me getting done for speeding. Look that one up in a 100E van. So these MG TAs had twin carbs, overhead valve engines, 1275, would outperform a lot of modern cars. Definitely without any trouble at all. They were little rockets. Beautiful 19-inch wheels. Right. Before I stop rambling on. Oh yes, I did buy another car off Steve Hall at Hall's Garage. Before we came to France, I was using in 2003. It's probably 2002. That I bought this MGB GT off Steve Hall. It cost me £1,800. Picture coming up. I've still got it actually. It's in the garage here. I'm gradually working on it. Get it back on the road. It's in fine fettle, apart from bodily. It's blinking good. I had a lot of welding done before I left England. It's fine. Mechanically it's fine. I'm just I'm turning it into a chrome bumper. It was a rubber bumper, you'll see in the pictures, but I don't like the rubber bumpers. Not really folks do, but I've got the chrome bumper kit and everything. It's here, gradually doing bits at it. I'll show you a picture in a minute on the on here where it is in its garage. So there we are. That's 16 minutes. I'm sure that's ample. If you like what we're doing, don't forget, we would like you to subscribe, share the story, give us a like if you like. Up here you can download the books, free downloads from our website, books, stories, audio stories, oodles and oodles of stuff. I'm sure there's something you'd like. So that's it for today, and until the next time, thanks for being with us, and cheerio.